Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us for this College of Humanities and Fine Arts Town Hall. My name is Sarah Gibbons, and I'm the Director of Communications for HFA. Today's webinar will be recorded and available for viewing at a later date, as will the slides presented here. By participating in this webinar, you're giving consent to be part of a recorded session. At the bottom of your screen, there is a Q&A option available. Please feel free to post a question at any time during the webinar, and we will do our best to answer as many of your questions as possible. Your questions will be submitted anonymously. Please note that the chat function will not be available, and participants' cameras and microphones will be disabled throughout the webinar. Thank you again for joining us, and I'd like to turn things over to Dean Krauthammer.
Hello, good afternoon. Thank you for joining us. As you'll know, I'm Barbara Krauthammer, Dean of the College of Humanities and Fine Arts and Professor of History. Before we get started this afternoon, I want to first acknowledge and thank the people who are working behind the scenes to make this presentation possible. Joe and Janine in the Alumni Affairs Office, Kathy Randall, Sarah Gibbons, and Julie Martell from HFA, all of whom have been working to make sure that all of the technical things come off without any glitches, and we are very grateful to them. I also just wanted to note quickly that I know last night's storm in Amherst has left many people without power at various points today. So again, my thanks to the entire group in HFA who have been working on their phones and backup batteries since yesterday afternoon to handle our logistics. And second, as Sarah mentioned, this recording and our slides will be available on the website. Now, to get started and to start with some good news, because there is a lot of good news and a lot to celebrate in our college, I want to introduce Associate Dean Joy Bowman, who's also a professor in the history department, and I'm very grateful to have this opportunity to be working with her in the Dean's office. And Associate Dean Bowman is going to give a brief overview of many of our accomplishments this year.
Thank you, Barbara. I'm going to have the slides advance. So we'll start in this crazy moment that we're living in with some of the teaching awards that came out towards the end of last year. The College Outstanding Teaching Award this year went to Sarah Cornell in the History Department, Karen Kruzinski in the History of Art and Architecture Department, and Garrett Washington also in the History Department. It was heartening to read the student commentary about these incredible teachers. And as you all know, they are three of many. So we're very proud of them. And we also had this year in HFA, the Distinguished Teaching Award go to Anne Broadbridge from the History Department as well. So we will move forward, Joe. Another high point in last year's activities is that our own Lisa Green in the Linguistics Department was nominated and awarded a Distinguished University Professor. So we also send out our congratulations to Lisa. You can advance it, Joe. Similarly, we celebrate the MacArthur Fellowship that Ocean Vaughn from the English Department MFA program won last year. Obviously, we're very proud to have him as part of our faculty, and not only for our students, but for the rest of us as well. So thank you, Ocean. Joe? We also welcome, in spite of these troubling, or as I've been calling them, sour times, new faculty in a variety of departments. You can see the list here from architecture to the writing program. And some of you who were online yesterday at the 5 at 4 got to meet a couple of our new faculty, and I hope that in the weeks and months to come, more of you will be able to get to know our new faculty from across the college. So with that, I will turn it, oh dear. I think I have one more slide, don't I, Joe? Sorry. I have one more slide of service awards. Did it disappear? Well, the slide may come up. If it doesn't, I will just share with you the service awards that we also need to honor this year. They go to Asha Nadkarni from the English department, John Higginson from the history department. They received the 2020 Distinguished Graduate Mentoring Award from the graduate school. And in addition to that, John Higginson in the history department received the UMass Advanced Faculty Mentoring Award. So with that, I will now turn it over.
All right, I keep forgetting to unmute myself. Thank you, Joy. I appreciate hearing the good news and the accomplishments. Certainly the level of productivity and success and commitment in scholarship and teaching and mentoring of all of the faculty was one thing that attracted me to UMass about 12 years ago, and certainly attracted me to the dean's role in that search last winter. I want to start this State of the College overview by giving you all just a quick recap of what's going on in our departments. And I want to do this with a very simple graphic from a previous town hall presentation that just shows the enrollments and some enrollment trends. So Joe, if you can bring up my slide, that's that next one, I think. Yep, there we are. And so I just want to point out that we have the data through academic year 2019-20, the previous academic year. The enrollment data for this current academic year, starting with fall 2020, hasn't been finalized yet. But I think this slide gives us a good picture of where our college is in terms of where our students are going within the college. If anyone's been playing around with the University Analytics database, you can see a lot more about where our students are coming from and where they're going to within the university. My understanding for this semester is that there's no significant change from the numbers that you're seeing here. But what I think this slide and some of the other data that I've seen show is that our enrollments are holding steady. And depending on one's perspective and inclination, you can read these numbers and the percentage changes as a glass half full story or a glass half empty story. And I think that there's probably room for both sides of that story. Today, and rather than getting too deep into the, is this a half full or a half empty, a good news or a bad news story, I simply want to say that going forward in my role as dean and working with each of the department chairs, we've already started having conversations in relation to the enrollment numbers and thinking about what the future of the departments and what the college can look like and what it should look like. So Joe, if you can take that down and just take me back to speaker view, I'm good. Thank you. All right. One thing that's clear to me about our college that's not really visible in charts such as that number of majors, primary and secondary majors, and percentage of change is the commitment of our faculty and staff to providing our students with a meaningful educational experience and to providing meaningful and cutting-edge research within our departments. And I think that's all the more striking, this commitment to education and research during what Joy has, I think, aptly described as this sour time. As we all know, that rapid shift to online education in the spring was jarring, and the continued effort and planning that was put in over the summer was exhausting. Some of our departments moved their entire curriculum online, and other departments worked out complex, and I must commend them for flexible arrangements to offer both face-to-face and remote courses to our students this fall and looking ahead towards planning for the spring. And of course, all of this was done with one priority, and that was ensuring that our students could continue their progress, their education, and their progress towards their degree in their majors and in their graduate programs. And so here, I just want to take a quick minute to thank Jackie Castledine, who's a member of the UWW Adult Degree Completion Program faculty, and she also connects with our college as the liaison between HFA and the UWW programs. And over the summer and through the beginning of this semester, Jackie has repeatedly served as a resource and a point of contact for departments and for individual faculty members, providing people with information, resources, and connecting folks with the Center for Teaching and Learning and the Ideas Group for course design to ensure that our online courses really were robust and engaging for our students and also for our faculty. When I interviewed for this position in the winter, I was asked a number of times variations on the theme of what's your vision for the college? Where do you see the college going in 5 years? Last night I had the opportunity to speak briefly with one of our alumni who had his own variation on that question, which was something to the effect of, why on earth would you ever want this job? And I had answers in February and I had answers over the summer and last night as well. And one of the things that's been clear to me since the beginning, since February, since the interview process, is that despite my having been on the faculty in the history department for 12 years, despite my having served as dean of the graduate school for the past 3 years, that I alone cannot and frankly should not set the vision for the college. Charting the path to the future has to be a collective and collaborative enterprise. To be sure, there are many responsibilities, many obligations, many challenges that are reserved exclusively for the dean. But at the same time, there are a number of responsibilities and opportunities that can be and should be shared among our faculty and staff and also our students. So throughout the interview process and during the past 2.5 months or so since I assumed the role of Dean of the College, I've emphasized that while I have priorities, areas that I have identified, as well as expectations that have been communicated to me by the provost, I alone cannot set the vision that will guide us forward, that will guide us through this pandemic and moment of remote education and uncertainty, and guide us past that towards the future. And I'm sure that there's some cliche about a leader being only as successful as those she leads or something to that effect. But I genuinely believe that. I genuinely believe that if I alone were to set the vision for the future of HFA, then all of you, faculty, staff, and students, would have little more than an email with some top-down mandates that had little to no resonance with you, with what you do, what you value, and what you hope to achieve. So this afternoon, in the time that remains, I'm going to begin by restating some of my priorities and then connect them to the planning process for developing a shared vision for the college that addresses both the challenges that we're currently facing and the opportunities that we might pursue moving forward. Certainly, much has changed since the day I accepted this position in March and last July when I started serving as acting dean. But a few things have remained constant. My commitment to advocating for the fundamental relevance of the humanities and fine arts as a core component of higher education has never been stronger. Those of you who are at my public forum job talk in February may remember that I showed a slide from the UMass archives from about, I think, the 1930s of the UMass Poultry Club. I think it was still Mass Ag then. And I said, you know, this is true relevance, right? They raise the chickens, they do the research on livestock raising, and then they have a chicken barbecue and feed everybody. And I thought that is a way to remain relevant. And I think the humanities remain relevant and have always been relevant. And the relevance is all around us, and it's really a question of seeing it and then highlighting it. For those who watched the vice presidential debate last night, one of the things that struck me and some friends with whom I was texting were that the exchanges about the history of racism in the United States, and indeed the larger debates about how we frame the history of the United States, all rest on the relevance of the humanities, right? Who is included in narratives, who is prioritized, whose perspective is given weight or dismissed. So for me, the question isn't, are the humanities and arts still relevant? But rather, how can we highlight this relevance in our everyday lives, as well as in our scholarly research and creative work? And in a few minutes, I'll detail some of the plans for highlighting this relevance. But at this moment, I want to state as clearly as possible that my commitment to advocating for the humanities and arts on our campus and in the broader context of higher education is wholly intertwined, indeed, absolutely inseparable from a fundamental commitment to advocating for and advancing diversity and anti-racism in our college and on our campus. Whether this is in the context of hiring, student enrollment and student recruitment, curricular content, co-curricular activities, advising and mentoring, career preparation, or alumni engagement. There's work to be done, and there's work to be done by all of us to address racism, sexism, xenophobia, homophobia, and other forms of bias and inclusion. And as I said at the outset today, leadership and vision have to reflect and incorporate the views and ideas of our faculty, our staff, and our students. So to that end, I've worked over the past month with the Office of Academic Planning and Assessment to have a survey sent to faculty and staff. And I do apologize for the glitches. I understand there were some glitches with people not receiving it right away. But I really want to thank everybody who took the time to respond to the survey and to provide honest and thoughtful feedback and input. And I understand from OAPA that the response rate was really quite high from both the faculty and staff who submitted answers. And I want to outline some of the points that emerged from the responses we received. On the point of challenges that our college faces and that have to be addressed both in my office, in my role as the dean, and also throughout the college in the departments, it's abundantly clear to me that we share many of the same concerns and have identified many of the same challenges. Namely, first and foremost, there's an overriding concern about the universities and colleges' financial situation, as well as concerns about technology and teaching remotely and the strains on our faculty and staff who have childcare and other family care obligations. On this point, I want to say very clearly and unequivocally that from day one, I think it was July 15th, I have been pushing back against the plans for the budget cuts in academic affairs. Specifically, of course, against the cut that's been planned for our college. And I've had some success in this area, and in a few minutes, you'll get more detailed information about the college's financial position. But for now, what I'll say is that my plan for the immediate future is to stand firm that the college cannot withstand additional cuts to our operating budgets, which fund faculty and staff payroll, graduate student payroll, and research, among other things. In the past 2.5 months also, I've secured some additional funding for those departments that are experiencing instructional stress, meaning not having enough instructors to offer the required courses that have student enrollments. I've secured additional funding as well for some critical hires, including a new chairperson for the Afro-American Studies Department. And for now, I'll end on this point of the college's financial situation by noting that this in particular is an area that going forward, we will have to have some difficult conversations, but we should also all commit to a spirit of collaboration and cooperation, of working together to address the challenges and to identify ways that we can move forward, identify ways that we can think about attracting both internal funding as well as external funding to our departments and to the college. We'll come back to the financial situation shortly. Other areas where there's a real sort of consensus around challenges and opportunities. Many people voiced concern about diversity and inclusion in the departments. Again, whether it's about hiring, recruiting graduate students, or the ways in which that faculty participate in faculty governance and leadership at the department level. And so this too is an area that's going to require real thought and attention moving forward. All of these concerns, I want to acknowledge, are real and have real impacts on people's daily lives and ability to plan for themselves, for their careers, and for their families. And certainly I take these concerns very seriously and am working to incorporate them into my planning for the college. But I also want to outline some of the points that were identified as strengths and opportunities, because from my perspective, this is where I see the heart of the vision for our college. On the strengths that were identified by faculty and staff alike were the points that our faculty are engaged in cutting-edge research and creative work. Faculty across the college are eager to embrace new technologies in their research and in their teaching, and certainly beyond simply using Zoom to communicate with their students. Faculty are experimenting with ways to use software in design, in music production, in creating digital humanities projects. And so this opens an opportunity for us to consider. And one opportunity that was identified again by a number of faculty and staff was the excitement around the possibility of reviewing curriculum to ensure that it's not only relevant and inclusive, but to ensure that it reflects and showcases the innovative research and teaching that our faculty are doing. Another strength, as I mentioned at the beginning, is faculty and staff dedication to undergraduate and graduate education, and dedication to serving students from across campus in our general education courses and in the writing program. And here too, a number of people identified as a key opportunity ways that we might think about greater community outreach and engagement with local K-12 schools, for example, bringing music programs, art programs, writing programs. A number of wonderful ideas were raised about ways that our departments can engage the wider community. It was also noted as a strength that our college already supports, and many of our faculty are engaged in, interdisciplinary research and collaboration, and that this too should be an area for future development and exploration. And certainly we can think about ways to, and have already engaged in ways for supporting faculty and student interdisciplinary research, support for conferences and programming that facilitates connections, and that allow folks to identify areas for developing concentrations within departments or certificates or majors. And here, in the spirit of collaboration, I want to point out two recent examples that I think are really models of that kind of interdisciplinary collaboration. Our conferences, online symposia this year organized by the Department of Architecture and the History Department's Feinberg Lecture Series. And then finally, the last strength that emerged as a point of consensus was a real commitment to diversity and inclusion, and to the work that departments are doing to ensure that not only do they have a diverse faculty and a diverse student body, but that the curriculum itself includes diverse perspectives and takes a spirit of inclusion and academic excellence as not mutually exclusive, but as fundamentally intertwined and mutually supportive. And here I would acknowledge both the work that's being done in the theater department and the music department to develop co-curricular programming that showcases the ways that the education and co-curricular programs can support diversity and inclusion and outreach. So in terms of planning and setting a vision, going forward in the upcoming weeks and months, we'll continue to analyze the survey responses and other conversations and input from faculty, staff, and students to develop a strategic blueprint for the college that reflects these shared commitments and goals, that addresses the challenges head on, and sets out specific ways that we can address them in both the short term and the longer term. I want to end here so that we have enough time for questions in the remaining 30 minutes or so. We've received a number of questions that were submitted in advance. And again, I thank those of you who submitted questions in advance for taking the time to do so. And we'll try to get to everybody's questions. I believe it was mentioned at the beginning that you can use the Q&A function to submit questions now in real time. And we will also do our best to get to those questions. If we are unable to get to your question, I apologize in advance, but I want to alert you that there will be contact information on the final slide at the end of today's presentation. And I would certainly encourage everybody to reach out and be in touch and submit your questions to the email addresses on that final slide. So now, if we can, I want to shift to the group view on the screen to introduce you to the entire HFA leadership group and begin some of the questions. So Joe, can you switch us over, or people turn on their cameras, I suppose? All right, I think that's everybody, right? So joining me, and I really want to thank everyone who's on the screen. In response to the alumni who said, why on earth would you consider taking this job during this awful moment? I said part of the reason was that I get to work with a really amazing group of colleagues. And I am very grateful to everyone who's here today. Associate Dean and Professor of History, Joy Bowman. Director of Diversity Advancement and Professor of Women's Gender Sexuality Studies, Millian Kang. Oh, Millian, oh, there you are. Associate Dean and Music Honors Program Director, Nikki Stoya. Assistant Dean in Advising in History of Art and Architecture, Undergraduate Program Director, Nancy Noble. Director of Administration and Finance, Lisa Leibowitz. And Assistant Dean for Administration and Finance, Pamela Simonera. All right, so we received some questions that we are going to answer in the spirit of shared governance that we're going to take turns answering. And so Lisa, I'm going to put you in the spotlight first. The question is, and this is really an aggregation of a number of questions that came in. We've all heard about the university's budget crisis and want to know how this has affected the college's budget. So,
okay,
go ahead.
Oh, thank you, Barbara. And thank you everyone for joining us today. I do have a couple of slides that I want to share with you that will help answer this question. Joe, if you can please show my first slide. So this graphic shows the FY20 sources and uses for HFA. And what sources means is that's the annual revenue and the budget allocations that come into the college. And uses, of course, is the annual expenditures for for HFA in total. So the sources bar that you can see is comprised of general funds, which is the purple bar, gifts and endowments, which is green, CEI funds, which is an orangey color, revenue, which is a dark purple, and research, which is red. So you can see that the largest bar, the purple one, is where we get most of our sources in HFA, and that is from the general funds. And to give you a definition of general funds, that's the money that gets allocated to us from the central campus, and it's made up of state, tuition retention, and general operating funds. And that makes up 87% of the college's total budget. On the sources side, you can see that I've sort of streamlined it a little bit. So it's broken down into payroll, which is all faculty and staff and student payroll, undergraduate student payroll. And then the next blue box is the graduate student payroll. And then the final box, which is in green, is all other expenditures that are not payroll. So things like scholarships, facilities, faculty startup, faculty research, administrative expenses, all those sorts of expenses. So you will see the two blue hued boxes really are the majority of our expenses, and that comes out to be about 91% of the total college expenditures. So all of our budget comes from, or most of our budget comes from the general operations side, and all of our expenditures go out for payroll. So although this is a streamlined view of our FY20 budget, I hope that it provides a clear visual of the effects of any budget reductions. So when HFA is assessed budget reductions, the percentage that is calculated goes against our general fund budget. So that means that even a 1% reduction equates for HFA to be about $500,000. So that means that whenever we get reduced, that purple bar decreases. Then when we are asked to reduce expenditures to meet these budget reductions, our non-personnel options, the part that's in green below, our options there are very limited. And so basically it's hard for us to make reductions that aren't payroll related, because it's just since 91% of our total expenditures are payroll. And on top of that, 90% of our general funds budget is payroll as well. So we really, our payroll expenses are very high, put it that way. So before moving on to the next slide, I just wanted to quickly point out something on the graphic. You'll see that our total FY20 sources is a little bit higher than our FY20 uses. And that's slightly misleading because these funds are not readily available for discretionary spending. What that gap represents are the year-end balances that are out in the departments and programs versus what's in the dean's office, plus any balances that are remaining in restricted funds. So even though there is a slight gap there, we really don't have that funding available for discretionary spending. So Joe, you can move on to the next slide. So in midsummer, all schools and colleges were asked to develop a 12.5% budget reduction plan to help the campus meet its multi-million-dollar budget deficit, which has been caused by the persistence of COVID-19. The FY21, so fortunately, HFA has been spared the 12.5 budget reduction for now. And our reduction has been tentatively set at 7.9%, or close to $4 million. We've been able to meet this target through a combination of personnel reductions, including the VSIP program, delayed hiring, and reduced non-personnel cost as well. So because of the pandemic, we've had reduced travel, we've had reduced events. The Central Budget Office hasn't yet allocated the FY21 annual budgets to the campus since they've been waiting for a clearer picture of the university's FY 2021 budget with all of its moving parts. In any event, it's important for us to continue to monitor our FY21 spending so that we're expending our limited resources on critical needs only. And as Barbara's mentioned as well, the priority is and will continue to be minimizing the disruption to education. So those are the end of my slides, but we did get a couple more questions related to the personnel side of the house. The first question is, I'm concerned that between retirements and the hiring freeze, my department will not have the faculty and staff it needs to function properly. So our response to that is that we will make sure that departments have the necessary staffing and will work with departments to address the situation on a case-by-case basis. And Pam and I have already started to do some of that. And the second question is, what steps are you taking to prevent any further staff furloughs? While we hope that the college's current budget reduction plan will be sufficient in that no additional actions will be taken, decisions about campus-wide personnel reductions are made by the university's leadership team. Any subsequent actions as a result of these decisions, such as furloughs, layoffs, reductions in time, are negotiated by the unions and university labor relations. Please know that we voice our concerns about the impact of personnel reductions at every opportunity that we get. Thank you. That's it for me.
I know you and Pam both have been working mightily to deal with these budget issues, and I am very grateful for it because I know it's difficult for you and I know it's difficult for everybody in the departments. And so again, as Lisa said, you know, we really have been voicing our opposition to the planned reductions, to the furloughs at every opportunity. The next question, somewhat related to this, Joy, is for you. Given the campus-wide austerity measures, will the college continue to support faculty research and department plans for online conferences and symposia?
Thanks, Barbara, for that. Yes, is the short answer. The dean has committed to making sure that we keep research and scholarly activities at the top of the list. And so obviously there's a travel ban, or not, let's not use that word. There is state monies can't be used for travel right now. And so since many of the presentation grants and other things like that were used in the past for traveling to conferences, we've shifted that and we are supporting people who want to do virtual conferences so that if you apply to attend a virtual conference and you need money to cover fees, those are the kinds of things that we can cover. We had a round of applications that came in last week. And I have to say that there weren't very many applications, and I don't know whether that was because people are just overwhelmed with Zoom and overwhelmed with getting their classes online, but we will have another round of applications that will come due in early spring. And so hope that people will take advantage of that. And so as Barbara mentioned earlier, we've already seen some of the monies being used in terms of the Exactitude conference that the architecture school did this past weekend, and earlier a TOCO endowed lecture also done in architecture. And so there are good things going on. And of course, the Feinberg series is a little bit different because there is an endowment to draw on. But that also requires other monies as well. It's not just the endowment. And so last night we had the second lecture with Mike Davis. And so there are things going on. So I hope that people will continue to look for Lynn Latham's emails from me, encouraging you to apply for those funds.
Thank you. And I do want to note that though there are two historians in the Dean's office suite now, myself and Joy, we really are supportive of and want to acknowledge the accomplishments of all of the departments. The Feinberg series, of course, has been a capstone this semester, but the music department, the theater department, and a number of other departments have developed really robust and exciting online programming that I am hopeful is gaining attention and, you know, is certainly drawing a wide audience of students and faculty and community members. And again, in that spirit of highlighting sort of the tremendously innovative and creative work that our faculty and students are doing, and that I am certainly committed to supporting, and that I know Joy shares this commitment of really thinking creatively for ways that we can continue to support faculty research and innovation in research and teaching and outreach. And so certainly if people have ideas about how to do that, how they would like to do that, again, please reach out and let us know. Okay, so our next question, Millian, is for you. And the question is, can you talk a little bit about what steps are being taken in the college to promote diversity and anti-racism?
So I think we're all facing a reckoning with how we respond to this question. On the one hand, I think that there are many faculty, staff, students, programs, and departments in the college that have made this their core mission to promote diversity in all its forms in all the different areas of their work. And at the same time, with all of the unprecedented challenges of this year, it's clear that we need to step up and do more. Just a couple examples, and you know, I worked with a number of faculty, including 4 HFA faculty were on this panel on anti-Asian racism during the COVID pandemic. And I think the panel came, it's on both the HFA and the diversity website if people want to see the recording. The strength of the panel was that this is ongoing work that our faculty are engaged in, so that again, we have people doing this in their research, in their curriculum, so that they could speak to both the historical and the contemporary context. And in addition, we had another panel that was community organizations and alumni and students. And again, this speaks to the work of our faculty in building those connections. Again, at the same time, we are really struggling with, again, there are clearly many, many challenges that we still have to meet. So, Joe, can you show my slide? Yeah, so here is just a statistical snapshot of where we are as HFA faculty. So just in terms of numbers, in terms of body counts, we're relatively diverse. So again, these are numbers contrasting, you know, HFA with the university-wide statistics. So we have the second largest number of faculty. Natural sciences is the largest, and SBS is behind us. Of those in our college, 50, I won't just read through all these, but to highlight again, sort of we are on par or better than most of the figures at the university, and particularly with URM tenure track faculty, we have 14% as opposed to 10%. But we clearly need to move just beyond, again, sort of these numbers. And even with relatively high representation, our faculty, staff, and students in various forms of feedback have told us that the college climate is still one where many people are experiencing marginalization and lack of support. So, Joe, could you move to the next slide? So, one initiative, and again, sort of this is a first step, is to form a diversity, equity, and inclusion advisory board in HFA, which will include representatives from staff, faculty, undergrad, and graduate students. So we know people are putting in a lot of time already and sharing many ideas. So we want, and we want to acknowledge that we want this to be not just about identifying challenges, but really figuring how we can work together to address concerns and to come up with initiatives to move forward.
Thanks, Millian. So there are a couple of other questions that have come through in the Q&A that I would like to acknowledge and respond to a little bit. So one of them, what commitments can you make to ending the dwindling of tenure lines and resulting increase in reliance on contingent faculty? And what are the best practices for treating our contingent faculty in an ethical and transparent way? So first, let me say one of the things that I have said from the outset is that I do not make promises that I cannot keep. So in this moment, while I would not say I will commit to any particular action or initiative, what I will commit to is saying that I'm continuing conversations with department chairs and by extension the wider faculty about planning processes within the departments for assessing faculty lines, faculty coverage, curriculum, and enrollment. Again, to think about how we can support and sustain robust education and research among our faculty in our departments. And as I said earlier during my comments about the college's financial situation, in some cases, this is going to entail difficult conversations about the allocation of resources, but my hope sincerely, and I'm already very grateful to all of the department chairs for participating in these conversations, is that we can have collaborative and thoughtful conversations about how to allocate resources and how to plan for the future. And it has to be a collaborative enterprise with faculty working with their department chairs and chairs working with me and the associate dean to develop plans that are feasible and appropriate and forward-looking to sustain the vitality and eventually the growth of our college. In terms of treating our contingent faculty, our adjuncts, I suppose, part-time faculty instructors, ethically and in a transparent way. I mean, I would certainly hope that that's what's happening now. In terms of securing multiple year contracts well in advance of the start date. Obviously, I know this is an issue when we're not sure of what enrollment will look like, what people's sabbatical plans and other course release plans will look like. And again, what I will say to that at this point is one thing I've been emphasizing with the chairs since July is really the importance of developing short and mid-range plans for coverage of teaching, mentoring of graduate students, so that we can minimize sort of the last minute surprises that of course affect those instructors that we hire on a short-term or case-by-case basis, so that we can plan out 1, 2, and 3 semesters in advance what our instructional needs will be, what the mentoring and advising needs will be, so that we can give our part-time instructors the respect and stability that they certainly deserve, as does everybody else. Sorry, I'm trying to scroll through read the questions and speak at the same time. Will we be teaching remotely or in person in the spring? Any word on current thinking? That I can certainly address, as I am co-chairing again for the spring curriculum planning committee with Senior Vice Provost Carol Barr. Currently, there is a curriculum planning committee that is working to look at the curriculum across the campus, again, asking departments to identify those classes that must be offered face-to-face because the instruction requires hands-on training. For our college, and a real shout out to these departments for doing this, again, such a complex task that they faced: theater, art, music and dance, architecture, and even one course in the history department that were deemed essential face-to-face courses. And we're looking at that list of essential face-to-face courses again for the spring. This committee that I am co-chairing, that again is looking at the entire campus, is not making decisions, but we're going through the same process we went through over the summer of providing recommendations to the chancellor, who, as he likes to say, is the decider. So our committee, along with committees that are working on research and libraries in terms of figuring out what kind of access faculty and students can have to library resources, to studios, so the fine art studios, spaces in theater and music, as well as, of course, the labs in the science departments. They too will be providing recommendations to the chancellor. The student affairs side of the house is also providing the chancellor with reports and recommendations about what the spring can look like in terms of how many students can live in the residence halls safely, how many students can be physically on campus for face-to-face instruction safely, how many students can be involved in on-campus research and other activities safely. And again, the chancellor has made clear, I think, throughout this entire experience that his priority is making decisions that reflect the best information of the science in terms of safeguarding people's health and well-being, both on campus for our campus community and for the local community in the town of Amherst and surrounding area. I think, and then the last thing I will say on this is, I think reading the tea leaves, it is a safe bet to assume that much of what we are doing in the spring will be remote as well. I think we all would like very much to be in person. And, for my 2 cents, the reality is looking like we will be remote, largely remote in the spring as well. But again, that is not the official word. The official word comes from the chancellor. There's another question. Do you foresee more involvement with UWW offerings? I will say on this that I would like to see more involvement with UWW offerings, simply because, again, there's so much great work going on in our departments. Some departments have already developed really successful and creative programs in conjunction with the UWW online education programs. I'm thinking the programs that come to mind right now are the Certificate in Professional Translation and Interpretation Studies. There are many others. So no disrespect to those that I'm not mentioning. That one just comes to mind right away. And I think these are great opportunities, again, to reach a wider audience of students, to connect with a broader community, and to be perfectly frank, to generate some income for the department and for the college. And I think one of the things that we're learning from this fall is there are many people who are interested in online education because they have family obligations, because they have work obligations. And indeed, this mode of instruction and communication, while maybe not our first choice, for many people is the most feasible and viable choice. And I think if we can bring our expertise and creativity to people who might not otherwise have access to it through an online course through UWW, then by all means, I think that's an area that we should explore. So let me take one more look at the Q&A. I apologize for the back and forth here. Lastly, I guess I will wrap up again. I see this question of what can HFA do to mitigate these quote unquote university decisions? And what I will say again is that everyone that you see on the screen has been voicing their opposition, I think very clearly and as high up as we can voice it. And I have encouraged the department chairs in our weekly meetings to share with their faculty that people should make their sentiments heard. And again, I will say that I think this is a moment where collaboration at all levels will be more effective than internal dissension and division within the college. But really thinking about ways that we can work together proactively to address the challenges and be prepared to meet them and meet them productively and come out on the other side, ready to continue to engage our students and support our faculty and connect with the university as a whole, I think has to be the first part of our mission, and the vision is going to be what gets us there. So let's see, the numbers of questions keep changing. Given that many universities are canceling graduate admissions for next year, do you see this as an opportunity for UMass to bring in an exceptional graduate cohort, right? So this is the half full, half empty side. And this is something that I know the chairs have been talking about within their departments and with me. And I think this is a case-by-case moment that we need to weigh the needs and situation of our current graduate students, many of whom are rightfully so reluctant to graduate and look for employment in the next upcoming semester and summer, and may really be looking to us for additional mentoring, additional professional development, and additional financial resources, with the opportunity to maybe recruit an exceptional graduate cohort when many of our peer and aspirant institutions, so far I've seen places like Yale, Harvard, Chapel Hill, and the University of Chicago, and I'm sure there are many others, are pausing their graduate admissions for a year. So I think that is a question absolutely that faculty and their department heads and GPDs should be thinking seriously about right now. There's another question, and then we really are going to wrap up because there are a couple more announcements. Women scholars are falling behind their counterparts given the COVID-19 related school closures. I hear you on that. What kind of support is the college prepared to offer female faculty to support their continued research activity? Well, first and foremost, I would point to some of the provost's actions of the delay for the tenure decision year, I think is really important. I would also point to some of the advisory groups that Millian mentioned that will be, I think, a really important vehicle for getting that kind of feedback and input from our faculty about what the real impact right now of this situation is and how we know it's going to reverberate into the future. And I think this is actually a place where our college can assume a leading role in compiling some of this data and developing meaningful and proactive plans to address it. Certainly I know on the sciences, they're already compiling a lot of data about the effects that the pandemic and remote education, remote teaching and remote work is having on women faculty, on their research and publications. And I really think that that's something we need to look at within our college and that we can look at to produce a meaningful set of initiatives to support women faculty in particular, who are facing a really unique set of challenges that certainly is going to have a longer term effect beyond the point when we are all vaccinated and back on campus together again. Okay, so we have 3 minutes left. I want to be mindful of the time, especially speaking of childcare obligations. I have an upcoming one, but I did want to take these last few minutes to acknowledge two people who are on our screen and then to acknowledge two more. First, I want to start with really sincere and deeply heartfelt thanks and appreciation to Lisa Leibowitz for just every minute of every day working with me over the past 2.5 months. And I want people to know, and Lisa has allowed me to share with everybody, that she'll be retiring at the end of the year. And I cannot thank her enough, and I encourage everybody to send Lisa a private note of thanks. And I also want to acknowledge that Pam Simonera is shadowing Lisa right now, and when Lisa retires, will be serving as the Assistant Dean for Administration and Finance. And I'm deeply grateful to both of you, Pam for coming in and joining us, and Lisa really truly for every minute of every day that we have worked together. You have just been a real blessing to me, and I am very appreciative of it. I also want to acknowledge Associate Dean Nikki Stoya, who will be retiring at the end of this calendar year. She has worked out that she will stay on for a post-retirement appointment through the spring semester. But Nikki, as I'm sure all of you know, really has been the pillar of the undergraduate advising office. And Likewise, I am tremendously grateful to Nikki for, always having an additional bit of information to contextualize what's going on the undergraduate side. And very grateful to her. And likewise, want to acknowledge Nancy Noble, who will be assuming the role of Associate Dean in the spring semester, and working a bit with Nikki as Nikki makes her way slowly towards retirement. You all have just been a tremendous group to work with, and I am very, very appreciative of each of you. So we are now at the 4:30 mark. I promise to be respectful of time. Again, I thank everybody who participated and watched us today for giving us your time and attention, for sharing your questions. And I truly do look forward to more conversations going forward, as challenging as these times are. I think that is the only way we will make it through these challenges, is by just continuing to address the issues at hand and working together. So thank you all very much.